Hi, I'm Laura. I work with startups on their brand and marketing strategies. And before that, I spent 20 years working in ad agencies with some of the world's biggest brands on their advertising campaigns. I'd like to talk to you today about how I believe that a clear brand strategy is the key to your startup growth, no matter who you are, whether that's B2B or B2C, and at what stage you're at, from seed to pre-IPO. Getting some clarity on your brand strategy can help you drive awareness of your products, increase your sales, attract the right investors, and secure the best talent out there to grow your company and deliver ROI. So let's have a look at what we're going to go through today. The topics we'll cover, we'll start with the design assets versus a unique brand. What's the difference? Then we'll look at why a brand strategy is the key to growth, the framework of what a brand strategy is, what we can learn from the unicorns, and applications for raising capital. Let's start with how we define what a brand is. I like this quote from the founder of one of the biggest brands on planet Earth. Your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. And the way I feel about Amazon is it makes my life easy. Everything they do is slick and faster than I could ever imagine. One click and it's mine. Delivered sometimes even on the same day. It's insane. A brand ethos is a feeling. It can be hard to achieve, but when done effectively, it can be hugely powerful. And it isn't just for the likes of Chanel and other lifestyle consumer brands. I don't know about you, but I have positive feelings for a fictional octopus when it gets me to playfully add my meter reading each month. It always makes me smile. Anyway, to quote Steve Jobs, it's a very noisy world, and we're not going to get a chance to get people to remember much about us. No company is. To resonate with the right customers, investors, brand partners, or future employees of your company, you need to stand for something. The question is, are you clear about what you want that to be? So let's do like a little thought experiment. Do any of these logos mean something to you? The ones on the far right, you might not even recognize. They simply have no imprint on you as yet. And the ones that have the biggest impact are likely to stand for something more than just the product they sell, like Nike or Peloton. Being clear on the why you exist, your brand purpose, is the secret to resonating with your target audience. If you skip this step, don't pay it your full attention, or only do it once, you're likely to be missing out on growth potential. Even great brands like Apple need investment and care if they're going to retain their relevance and vitality. We all know that Apple lost its way before Steve Jobs came back and did his magic. So on the subject of logos, what's the difference between design assets and creating a unique brand? In 2024, it's easier than ever to get some assets together from a freelancer or an Upwork or someone on Upwork or through an AI. I see a lot of early stage startups skipping the strategy phase and going straight to a logo and a color palette and then applying these to the websites. But this is not a brand. This is design that may or may not reflect what your business does, depending on how good your brief was. So let's look at the difference between the two. On the left, you can see that the creation of design assets is a pretty simple process. You brief a designer and off they go, getting a look and feel for your company with a logo, colorways, icons, and perhaps a tagline. And then they apply it to your website and marketing emails and ads, etc. This may well be some quality design and a beautiful piece of work, but the question is it born from a brand proposition? When you start with a brand strategy, however, as you can see on the right-hand side, you have a more informed design immersion before you work up the brand identity and then apply it. And you can create a brand expression and evolve the messaging stemming from the brand purpose and the audience insight. This can perfect your product market fit, and this can lead to game-changing creative advertising campaigns and help you to grow faster than your competition. So why is taking the time to create a brand strategy the key to growth? Well, firstly, it crystallizes your purpose. Why do you do what you do? What do you stand for? Who do you do it for? And how do you fit into this world? This may seem like the simplest set of questions ever, but I promise you that won't be. It's the most overlooked area of creating a brand. Sometimes it's outsourced, sometimes left in the hand of a junior marketing assistant, but it's crucial. And believe me, Nike and Apple take this very seriously. If you're a founder, a CEO, a chairman, or director of a startup, then this is a conversation that you absolutely need to be in. It will single-handedly change your business. A brand strategy also gives you a clear positioning, carving out your place in the market and providing defensibility as you grow. It also raises questions about if you want to move and what it would take to get there. It's a bit like a game of chess. As you start, you can start to move and when you spot opportunities in the market or block out competitors by becoming known for something. For example, in the travel sector, Ryanair owns cheap flights, and EasyJet has moved up a quadrant as a cheaper end of experience-led travel, moving more into kind of Virgin's quadrant. It also streamlines your process and gives you a consistent look and messaging. Whether you're looking to impress investors or acquire new customers, a consistent brand makes you look professional. Less than 10% of B2B businesses say they have consistent branding, so you can get one step ahead of the competition by sorting out your brand comms. And one of the most useful outputs of a brand strategy for me is the messaging matrix. This is a simple grid outlining who your audience is and why they should care about your brand and products, and it can be used for your sales and marketing teams across every single acquisition and retention campaign that they create. We use these all the time. It's your North Star for decision making. It stops you from doing stuff that isn't right for your business, helping to shape your growth in line with your vision and your values. As Steve Jobs puts it, deciding what not to do is as important as deciding what to do. It can help steer the business forward and navigate tricky waters. Every decision should be based on this. Is this in line with our brand? Should we hire this person? Should we diversify our product range? Is this the right investor for us? Are they aligned with our goals and our values? It can motivate and bring energy and focus to your teams, inspiring people to do their best work. When you're clear on your why and what your vision is, when there is simplicity and an elegance of thinking and design, energy flows. It's contagious and hugely powerful as you inspire people to join you on this mission. And that energy and focus will carry through. It helps you to attract the right investors and the best talent. We all know that people are your biggest asset. And what do we know about the best people out there? They can do whatever they like. Everybody wants them. In my experience, what they want is a company that aligns with their values, has inspirational and creative leaders, and a clear vision, with a role that challenges them to be the very best they can be. And now onto my favorite reason of them all, and something I'm really passionate about. It's the springboard for creative advertising campaigns. I'm such a believer in what creativity can do for a business. And with a startup with tight budgets, the stakes are even higher. It can be a game changer if you get it right. You can knock the competition out of the park. But you need to set the foundations. When you are clear on your brand values, tone of voice, audience, proposition, and specific message, you can now start to have some fun with a creative campaign idea to get your target audience's attention and drive a set call to action. So, what does a brand strategy look like? Creating an ownable brand strategy can be a big piece of work. So I'm just going to walk you through the key areas and then run through a couple of examples from Unicorn so you can see it in action. It consists of 6 key components: your DNA, your vision, values, personality, audience, and your mission. So starting with your DNA, the what, how, and the why. What do you do? Every company knows what they do. These are the products you sell or the services you offer. This gets you to your proposition and your positioning statement. How do you do it? Some companies know how they do it. It's the thing that makes you special, that sets you apart from the competition. This gets you to your reasons to believe that statement. Why do you do it? This is your brand purpose, and very few companies know why they do what they do. All this gets you to your brand tagline, which goes alongside your logo. Next is your company vision. Where do you want to go? This could be a 5-year positioning change or a new audience that you'd like to appeal to with a different product. So, for example, Airbnb wanted to carve out a new sub-brand for the luxury market, so they created Airbnb Luxe. Next, what are your core values? What are the beliefs that your company stands for? They shouldn't change dramatically. So you need to get this right from the get-go. Your business will evolve and your brand will evolve, but who you are and what you stand for shouldn't change with the wind just because it's suddenly fashionable to do something. This is a trap that brands can fall into. You need to be authentic. Patagonia's path towards living up to its commitment to sustainability has involved decades of acknowledging flaws and solving problems. But staying true to this value has also driven product innovation and customer loyalty. The billionaire founder even gave the company away to tackle climate change, which is pretty extreme. Next up is your personality. In the 1940s, Swiss psychologist Carl Jung developed a set of common personality archetypes that brand strategists still use today. There are 12 to choose from, including the creator, the explorer, and the hero, and you can see where the different brands fit on this wheel. So where do you sit? Ideally, you want to ask your staff and your customers, because as in life, those who interact with you are the best fit to describe your personality. If you're looking to evolve and thinking about rebranding, then this is a useful exercise to see what fits with your new positioning and how you're looking to shift the existing perception people have of you, like the EasyJet moving away from the cheap air travel that we talked about. Next, we'll move on to defining your audience. So here's your target audience. Being clear on who they are and how they behave is critical to growth. What do you know about them? How do your products or your services make their lives better, easier, or more enjoyable? What's the best way of getting their attention? What values do they have and how do they live their lives? Customer-centric feedback and data insights can drive innovation to develop better products and services. This is something Amazon and Stripe are masters of. The final piece is your brand mission statement, where you put it all together. Can you get people's attention? Your mission statement communicates your brand's purpose and vision. It should resonate with your audience and give them an idea of who you are, what you do, and why. Let's do a quick thought experiment. Imagine you're called up by Will at Clear Channel. He offers you space on a 48 sheet across from one of the busiest high streets you operate in. He tells you, so it's text only and I need it in 24 hours. What copy would you send to him? Now you've got a clear brand strategy, you're ready to market like a brand leader and dominate your sector with some creative game-changing ad campaigns. Here's a chart plotting the route from brand strategy to advertising campaign. So we can go from creating a brand identity and an expression of the brand to the core messaging and then move through to a marketing strategy. For example, the objective might be to drive awareness of the brand or product with a developer audience and a defined message. We can then get through to some campaign ideas and then a campaign tagline. Let's see this in action with the B2B fintech startup Expensify and look at the story of how they went from a 2019 Super Bowl commercial to a full rebrand, creating a unique, surreal universe. Expensify's founder, David Barrett, started the company because he hated doing expense reports. He saw an opportunity to give people their time back so they could focus on higher order pursuits. Had he tried to sell his product as software that scans receipts and sends them to accounting, it may well have fallen flat. Instead, he positioned his product as a solution that enables employees to do what they love by eliminating the manual tasks they don't. He was clear on his why, and it came from brand truth. This is why it resonated with the companies, big and small, and helped propel Expensify to be the expense solution for more than 60,000 companies worldwide. So let's look at how Expensify might have filled in their brand strategy. What is it? It's a software company that scans receipts to send to accounts. How? Using smart scan technology. Why? Because people hate doing expense reports. What's the vision? To be the market leader. What are their values? Solving real life problems, having fun, and getting stuff done. And what personality traits from the archetypes did we see earlier? Creator, caregiver, and jester. Who's the audience? Business professionals. What's the mission? To live rich, have fun, and save the world. This then fell into the proposition, so receipt software that enables professionals to focus on other things, and then translating this in a more emotional way for the brand is the tagline, you weren't born to do expenses. This then created into the brand identity, which brings Expensify's vision and culture to life through consistency. It unifies all of the brand's digital, physical, and product applications, ensuring that they all share the same personality. And using different tiers of illustrations, some are more functional to be used as icons within their user interface, and some more expressive for specific actions, keywords, or messages. The result was a brand toolkit for all their marketing needs. The brand expression is a colorful and a surreal animated universe, a whole world where expense reports don't suck and receipt scanning can be done in outer space. This illustrated world represents the world they're trying to build through Expensify, a world where you can be weird, wacky, and totally yourself, but always with a purpose. A world where all creatures can collaborate to get stuff done while having a good time along the way. These illustrations are a way to make the brand feel unique and different from any other brand in the expense management world. The rebrand for Expensify was born out of the success of their 2019 Super Bowl commercial, bringing to life their brand proposition, "You weren't born to do expenses." In January 2019, rap mogul and big spender 2 Chainz released a new single, Expensify This. It was the most elaborate product demo in history, the world's first interactive music video where you could snap a photo and expense over $500,000 worth of receipts to win as cash prizes if you downloaded the app. Expensify This was a big, fun, well-crafted, innovative, and truly inspiring example of an integrated creative advertising campaign. The campaign created over $62 million in earned media and a 1,400 increase in customers. Here's a snippet of it. I think it's brilliant, and it shows how even when what could be discovered as a dull product can be transformed into something super creative, fun, and engaging.
Whip too refined for the horsepower. Gotta running off a seafood tower. Know that I'm here for a reason. Car so cold that it's sneezing. Day in the life of a baller.
Mr. James. Hi. Record label finance. Listen, I'm gonna need paper receipts for everything in this video if you want to get reimbursed.
Nah, I have Expensify for that.
What?
Cause I had to snap it with Expensify. My garage abracadabra. Ice whip 2 chicks that look like Cleopatra.
For our second example, let's take a look at how Airbnb evolved its brand strategy to become the world's first community-driven super brand. As the brand grew and had more data and insights from their audience, their original proposition of a place to stay was not as relevant anymore. This is quite an old one, but I think it's a good demonstration of how startups can and need to evolve their brand strategy as they grow. Back in 2014, it became clear that Airbnb was all about people and not about the places at all. The passion of its founders and the love and generosity of people around the world were changing the culture of travel with places and personal experiences unlike any other. Belonging the world over was Airbnb's truth and its differentiator. This evolved their strategy and defined Airbnb's brand mission as belong anywhere. This higher purpose gave Airbnb a clear reason for everything they did throughout the business. Let's take a look at the strategy. So they had this audience insight of Airbnb is about places, people, not places. What is it? This never changed. It's an online platform app that connects people to unique homes and travel experiences. The how did change, enabling people to live like locals and feel at home anywhere in the world. And the why changed. We believe in a world where people belong anywhere. They changed their brand identity, and they changed with the logo, the new tagline. So from a place to stay, it moved to belong anywhere. This started with a change of logo, one that we're actually still using today, creating a symbol that represents belonging. Here it is. The higher purpose of belonging shifted the brand's language and messaging from location and price to focus on the warmth and welcome of no longer feeling like a tourist in an unknown place. And here's their version of the ClearCast 48 sheet opportunity screaming out their brand vision. This shift in Airbnb's brand proposition also sparked a whole new advertising campaign. I would imagine that they took the brand territory of belong anywhere as a creative brief, and then a creative agency would have generated several different execution ideas. This would have then led them to a campaign tagline live there even just for a night. And this was the one they would have chosen. And then this is the start of a new campaign for them. And here it is in the real world. You can see the campaign line and the new logo and the brand strap line underneath. Finally, let's have a quick look at how your brand strategy could be applied at raising capital. Are you clear on who your target investors are? What are you looking for them to bring outside of a capital injection? Do your brand values align? What do you know about them? How are you going to stand out? This isn't a one-sided game. Investors need startups as much as startups need investors. Don't underestimate your value and be willing to walk away if the fit's not right. Your job is to become as attractive as possible by being clear about who you are, why you exist, what your roadmap is, and presenting a consistent brand across all touch points. The Wholesale Investor Chris platform is a great way to do this. You can take this information from your brand strategy and apply it to the problem, solution, competitive advantage, etc. The secret is to attract, not to chase. You want to get on the front foot and attract the right investment. This can be through becoming a thought leader through personal and company content across LinkedIn, podcasts, industry platforms, and events to gain exposure, creating a halo effect. It's not about constantly promoting your company, rather giving insights about your industry, problems and challenges, storytelling about how you're solving customer pain points. Your message to investors switches from, we need funding to survive and grow, to, we're growing well, we're clear in our vision and what our challenges are. We could be a great investment for you. I'd love to know what your current business challenges and ambitions for growth are. Are you looking for investment or to embark on some advertising to drive customer acquisition? Is everyone on your business clear on what you stand for and your positioning in the market? I hope there's something in here that has sparked an idea for you. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much for that very insightful presentation, Laura. I think, based on your extensive experience, it'd be great to dive into some Q&A. So I've prepared some questions that kind of divided into like 4 categories. The first one is an introduction to you, your experience, then a deep dive into Ozer Consultancy, specifics of Ozer's role in startup development, and then finally encouraging some sort of engagement. So first and foremost, with over 23 years in the brand and marketing industry, including positions in global marketing agencies, how has your journey influenced your approach to brand building today?
Yeah, I think my experience, it's pretty broad. So when I was younger, I switched around quite a bit. So I guess in the old days, people would sit in certain silos. So you might be in brand, you might be in advertising, you might be a strategist, you'd be an account handler, you might work across certain industries, and it was pretty siloed. Whereas I jumped around quite a bit. I think I've always been a very curious person and I like to be challenged. So I moved through quite a lot of them. So that gave me experience, which now today I find can be really helpful for clients because I know quite a bit about different areas. So the branding piece and one of the things I talked through in this was just showing how the brand strategy piece has such a big role when it comes to thinking about creative advertising. So for me, they're not split into two, they're not two distinct areas, that there's an overlap and there's a need for one and the other. And I think by understanding both pieces, it means that you can quickly get to some really interesting areas. So I think that's one thing. The other might be from a kind of brand advertising and performance advertising point of view. And I see this quite a bit, and I talk about this quite a lot with founders, because when depending on your work, I mean, budget's always tight, no matter how big you are, and thinking about what percentage of your marketing budget you want to spend on brand advertising and what percentage you spend on performance, which is, going straight through to sales. Now, there's a tendency to always go with the performance led because you can see immediate results. You can literally look at the data and see how things are doing. From the brand side, it's harder. However, I would encourage everybody to think about the brand from the get-go and bring it into their marketing strategy at whatever stage they're in, because if you do that, you lay the foundations for that, like the slide we talked about, the defensibility slide later on. So when you've carved out your niche, Expensify is a great example. When you've carved out your area and you've got a very strong brand attached to it, it's really difficult for other people to come in, and then you're not stuck in this price war.
That makes complete sense. And I think, one of the questions I have that is in line with kind of what you've just said, how would you advise startups to balance creativity and data-driven strategies in their branding approach?
Well, you can. So you can. I mean, the great thing about advertising marketing today is you can test quite a lot of it. So you can test creative, you can A/B test different creative, but knowing what space you occupy in someone's head is harder to measure. And you can do lots of massive brands. And I've done, obviously, when I was working in a bigger agency, there was a lot of money put in researching brand sentiment for huge clients, Coca-Cola, Samsung, etc. They spend a lot, they spend a lot of money on that. But what somebody says and what somebody does can also be quite different. So I remember we had working on a couple of car brands, for example, and our strategist would always say in client meetings that why somebody says they buy a car and why they actually buy a car can be two completely different things. So if you're trying to measure that, they might give you the functional response. They might say, I'm buying this car because it's got a catalytic converter and it's got X, Y, and Z. But actually they're buying it because they just love the brand. They just love, it's a lifestyle choice. They want to be seen in that Audi. So it's sometimes hard to measure it. But from a digital sense, you can definitely measure creative in terms of what's landing from a brand perspective. It's just the performance takes you further. So the brand creative is telling you something about a brand, but the performance is the call to action. It's the someone clicking on something to do an action to buy it, and that takes you further down the sales funnel.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned that it's hard to measure, right? So that aspect, that thing, it's difficult to quantify. Have you, in your experience, found a way to quantify that, and perhaps, or is that still very hard to quantify, even still today, and with all the data that we
brand side?
The brand side.
So you can, I mean, you can do it. You can do customer surveys. People do spontaneous recall. People use focus groups. So you can say, so for example, let's say you were coming into the market of online, door-to-door food delivery. So let's say, you've got Just Eat, you've got Deliveroo, and you're coming in as a third one. So you can do surveys. We work with a research company who can set up a survey, which can even be just done on Facebook, really simple. So you could do some work, and then you could get in you could do an online group, or you could do an online survey where you get people to spontaneously recall what are the delivery services they're aware of, and what do they think about them. And then yours might happen there, a free form answer. Or you then might have a secondary question which mentions your brand, your company, and just see how it relates to the other two. And then over time, you can see, are you getting any traction in terms of the awareness of your brand or your product service, and also what are people attributing to it? And is it the messaging that you're trying to, because you're trying to steer messaging and steer how people feel about you, and then you're trying to measure whether that's having any impact, which is kind of that brand positioning slide.
That makes sense. And now moving on to maybe startups, and with the experience that you have working with startups, what are some of the most common challenges they face in branding? I know you touched on a couple of things in your presentation, but if you could pinpoint a couple that they face in branding and how you suggest they overcome them. You mentioned one, which is the expense, right? The branding expense versus the sales and marketing expense in general. But you know, how do they overcome that? And how, for example, in that scenario, how would they look? How would you make it so that they understand that the longer term picture is as valuable, or perhaps even more valuable than the short term gains of putting everything into sales?
Yeah, so well, I think one thing is, well, there's two things there. One of them is, if you're clear on, and that comes back to that beginning bit, if you're really clear on who you're trying to talk to, what you're doing that's different, what's going to resonate with them, if you can be super tight and super clear on that, then that means that anything you do, you've got a very single-minded message that's going out that's likely to land if someone sees it a few times. And if you're doing something that is what they want, then that should land with them, right? So it should be that you're trying to push this kind of like, you know, like us. It should just be, oh, you're this, we're that, this is how we do it in a way that's better, easier for your life. Oh, great, fantastic. That's for me. I want to do that. So that's one way of doing it. The other way is that creative piece. So once you know what is the key message you want to get out to this audience that you know is the right audience for your company and your product, then it's creatively, how do you express that in a way that's going to cut through? And some of the agencies I worked in, the creative agencies, you know, often we were we were working for the challenger brand, we were working for the underdog, for almost the startup in the category, and they've got to work harder. So it's more and more important to make sure that you're clear on what you're saying, because you don't want to waste any money. You haven't got media budget to waste. You know, whereas the bigger brands, obviously they're going for a larger volume of people as well, but they're kind of blasting out to more people. So I would say, even in a performance marketing plan, you can weave in some aspect of the brand to it. And again, that's why having the brand identity and your expression, having all of that set out and locked down, means that even when you're just saying a very specific message that's leading you through to a call to action around your product, it's still got the brand woven in terms of how it looks. So even in that very simple illustration, you're doing something about the brand in a sales message and wrapping it in. So I would say, you know, the key for me is getting your brand clear, knowing what you're trying to do from a performance side, and then trying to integrate both of them. So not seeing them as completely separate. And
Great.
understanding, and it depends whether you're, you know, business to business, business to consumer is slightly different as well.
Yeah.
And the way you do that. But I would argue that we're all people at the end of the day. So even if you're in a business, you're still trying to get my attention and get me interested, and knowing what I'm interested in and wrapping that up in a way that looks good is going to be impactful.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you mentioned that, especially on the B2B side. I mean, B2C, obviously you get ads, you know, I get ads on Instagram, Facebook, whatever it is that I'm using. But more and more recently, I'm seeing a lot of B2B ads, and it's led me to have conversations internally about maybe getting that software. And as you mentioned, I think the B2B ads, B2B marketing, and B2B branding is very important, because at the end of the day, it's the individuals making decisions, not businesses per se, right? So exactly. Yeah, that's very interesting. I think, you know, moving on, I'd like to focus a bit on why you decided to find Ozer, and how does it represent maybe a culmination of your previous experiences, having worked in big agencies, working directly with companies inside their organization, and now you started Ozer. So could you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So I mean, the creative part. So I guess for me, I've always been interested in business. I did business studies, I did economics, and then I did psychology. So to be honest, it was kind of there. I guess the answer was there pretty much from my A levels. So I set up Ozer because I felt that in the creative agencies that I loved, I felt like it wasn't as close to the business problem that I wanted to work on. So we were sort of a bit one step removed. We were at the other end of a creative brief to then try and find a solution for that client. And as much as we would challenge them on the brief, we wouldn't be challenging them on the business as such. And then I've always had an interest in startups. And actually, even when I was in agencies, I bounced around from like the big agencies like JWT, for example, huge global agency, right through to the startups within the independent agencies. And so it just so happened that I worked, actually, I got brought in to work with a media agency. And they were they were actually part of a fund. And so I then I came in as the MD, and I had to report straight to the investors. And that gave me a whole other world. Obviously, they were all obsessed with the performance side, which makes sense. So I was in this performance marketing world, having been in a more creative and branding world. And I knew I wanted to set up on my own. I think that's when the stars aligned for me. And I just thought, okay, here's an opportunity, because I started going to all these startup events, and I realized that quite a lot of people are siloed into brand, marketing, advertising, they're all in these different areas. And so what I wanted to do was bring in this sort of big agency thinking and the stuff that I'd learned, but also weave in kind of more business consultancy. So that's sort of what and I wasn't 100% sure how it was going to land at the beginning, but what I did is I started just listening to, from my side, listening to my clients and understanding where the value was. And then I started moving and evolving the company. And now it's a strategic consultancy across a number of different areas. And so that's what I did. I love working with lots of different types of companies. I love working with founders, CEOs, and the growth side. This is it's a competitive and it's a hard landscape, but it's really interesting. So it works well.
Yeah, competitive it is, but also, as you mentioned, it is definitely extremely interesting. But in terms of, could you maybe elaborate on how your philosophy, Ozer's philosophy of kind of what you were mentioning, combining clarity and creativity, is put into action when working with startups? So maybe this big idea thinking of big agencies combined with your experience of and your love of startups and growth.
Yeah, so I think for startups, and look, I did exactly the same thing as what I preach not to do. So the tendency is to just try and do everything, because you've got this vision and you've got this idea of what you want to do, and from a marketing perspective, there's a danger that you can spread yourself too thin and then not really learn anything and not really get anywhere fast. So it's this sort of more linear approach. So I think the one thing that we do that I really enjoy is helping bring that clarity to. So I often work straight with the founders, straight with the kind of, the CEO, the COO, whoever is the key sort of, key people running the business. And it helps. I find it helps that sometimes you're so close to it and you're so in it that it's hard to kind of take that more helicopter view and just have someone to just ask some questions that you all then have to kind of answer together. They're all in there, like everything's within the company. It's just a case of trying to pull it out. So there's that clarity piece. And then obviously spending a lot of time in creative agencies, I really understand the power of creativity. But for me, that creativity shouldn't just be locked into an advertising campaign. So I believe that creativity can change a business massively, but it doesn't just have to be at a creative stage of what you're doing. So look at Steve Jobs, Amazon, all these amazing companies and people, they bring creativity. So it's creative problem solving, essentially.
Yeah.
So it's understanding what you want, understanding where you are, being really clear and honest with where you are, knowing where you want to go, and then plotting out a plan. And then you can slot in the kind of the brand, the marketing, depending on what you need to do, what needs help.
Yeah. I find it interesting that you say creativity shouldn't be locked in the advertising space. I think a lot of companies, when they think of creativity, a lot of it's instantly put onto marketing or advertising, as you mentioned. But the companies that I've worked with in my two years with Wholesale Investor, the ones that find solutions are the ones that think outside the box. And I think those two words, creativity and thinking outside the box, are very tied. So it's definitely interesting what you're saying. I think moving on. Yeah, sorry, go for it.
Oh no, I was just going to say, just sort of adding on to that, you know, creativity can come from anywhere in your business, and like being in agencies, this was something that some of them were really good at. So they, you know, they didn't just a creative idea can come from anywhere. And I think that as someone who's running a company, like, always try and get information and insights from the people. Like, usually it's the most junior people in a company that are the cold face of what's going on. Like, they absolutely understand. They're talking to the customers, they're talking to the audience, so they know what people want, they know the reality of what's there. So if you can just ask them what, you know, what are consumers wanting, what's not quite working, what is working, if you can try and get some of that little bits of intelligence together, then that might just be an insight that can spring an idea for a campaign that could be, you know, absolutely brilliant. So yeah, everybody is capable of creativity in my eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, talking about that, the junior people who perhaps some of the most creative people, I think I read a report on some consulting firms who are now looking to not hire people with necessarily who have consulting backgrounds, but any background, right? Because it brings a different mindset to it, and they're much more open to this idea of hiring literally anyone who could fit in and bring something new, which is really interesting, because traditionally it's always been numbers, analytical, and that's it. But now they're looking more towards the creative problem solving aspect, which it's definitely
there's a difference between creative thinking and creative ideas, and the key is just, it's almost like you're the kind of maestro, like somebody has to be the maestro as to how to pick those, you know. And this is what a great creative director does in an agency. And it's the same way that for me, a founder or CEO looks at all the people in the business and who they're working with, and they can get these little insights. So they can get these ideas and these insights, but they just then know what to do with them. And that's, you know, that's something that can be really powerful.
Absolutely. Could you maybe share an example of where Ozer's intervention work significantly accelerated a startup's growth, or perhaps even investment acquisition?
Yeah, there's a couple of ones I could quickly go over. So in different kind of categories. One of them was it was a sound tech company, brilliant. They're called Iris. I mean, they're amazing. I love working with them. They had a B2C and a B2B model. So that was kind of interesting, because we got to work across, you know, there's sort of these two sort of tracks to it. But they came to us because they actually had quite a few different, they were Series A, so they'd had some funding, and they were looking to launch a headphone product. But before they were going to launch these headphone product, they needed to just kind of get their brand in order a bit and then figure out the activation. And the bit that they needed was they had all these documents. So they had all these kind of bits of brand strategy documents, brand comms, identity, all of that stuff. But they were almost overwhelmed by the amount of stuff that they had. And they needed to find a way to try and distill it down into something. And then this crucial bit, so I see this quite a lot, and I've been involved personally on quite a few of these, where there's a lot of information and there's a lot of theory, but then what they need is an activation plan. So like, how do we translate this? Like, we've got all this stuff, and then we know what we're trying to do. We're trying to launch these headphones, and we've got some clear targets of what we want, you know, how many people, how many sets we want to have sold to get to our next stage and unlock the next part of investment. But what they needed was just an activation plan for how to get there. So what we did is we distilled all of these documents and made sure, and just put it into something that was clear, created a brand book with them. So they had some design and resource in-house as well. And they also had this creative team who could do brilliant creative team. But what they were missing was this creative strategy. So this activation piece, like, what are we going to do? And then what does it look like? They had a an opportunity with Sky to do a TV ad, and they didn't have very long to do it in. And so what we did is we distilled this information, got the plan together, working with a digital agency that they had as well. And then we helped create basically wrote the creative strategy that then sparked the ideas for all of their content and all of their, and the ad and a load of other video content. They did a partnership with Red Bull. It was amazing. I mean, I really enjoyed working on it. It was great. So that was one example of kind of further down the line, but just needing a bit of strategy to help unite and get this launch into a really good place. They sold out with their headphones. I mean, they had to stop the campaign. They worked well, which was good. And they were brilliant. And then the second one was different, as a fintech called Suits Me. So they were a B2B, and they were actually they were growing, and they were looking to go more into the B2C space, retaining the B2B, but they wanted to talk to this new customer, and it was more of a lifestyle. So they were essentially a bank. So they needed to switch up their branding. Before, it was quite corporate looking. It was just blue.
Yeah.
And so this required a whole new, so we did a whole rebrand with them. So all of this stuff we talked through, we did for them, and gave them more of a lifestyle look and feel. And also we worked on a bit of strategy for how to optimize their website as well. So we kind of helped them, and then on their kind of brand comms, and they saw an immediate increase in their conversions on the website, which was good because it was a direct, with both of those, there was direct results that came off the back of it, which is really good. And then we also did getting investors, we worked with a recruitment technology app. So I saw them pitch, actually, and they had a brilliant product, but their pitch was a bit too long. And it didn't, for me, it just didn't, it was almost when they went to the pitch that they got lost. That, sometimes I see this, that they went really in on the tech bit, and because that was great, but they went so hard on like 10 slides or whatever well, it wasn't that bad, but like on the tech side. But they had a brilliant product, and the people behind it were fantastic. And so I worked with them on just optimizing that pitch deck, and I just approached them after it and said, let me get my hands on it. This was right at the beginning, to be fair. And luckily for me, and them, I guess, they were like, yeah, okay, let's have a go at it. And then I just did a bit of a session with them, and I was just asking and challenging, and it was really interesting to do. And then we distilled it down, and then they got 250 grand over the ask within, I think it was literally like 2-3 weeks. It was amazing. Yeah, and then actually on the back of that, I ended up sitting on a panel from this investors to sort of help with understanding the brand and the marketing side of the companies that they were looking through their deal flow.
So essentially, if you want to increase conversions quickly, stop a campaign because it's too effective, or raise capital over a raise in a short period of time. They should all come to you. That makes sense. You mentioned how you also help companies not just grow, but also look to secure their next funding round, right? Is there a difference between the two and how you approach it? Or is it all part of the same thing?
What do you mean? Sorry, explain that again.
When you help companies, startups, you help them grow, and you also help them secure their next round of finance. Is there a different approach to doing one or the other, or is it all part of the same strategy?
Oh, I see what you mean in terms. So actually, it's a really really good question, because one of the things that I always say to people, and one of the things that we have in the back of our minds when we're doing these campaigns, is thinking about, well, getting very clear on why you're doing what you're doing, and then almost as a parallel to doing whatever the campaign is to grow, is to think about what's the what's the investor story that you're building with this action that you're taking. So let's say, for example, one of the clients we work with, they were at the absolute beginning. So they had a product, they were looking, it was another finance was actually. So they were looking to, it was for retail investors. They had a website. We helped them on the strategy, and it was from the sales perspective. But what they needed was they needed to show some traction. So in order to unlock this, they were very much seed stage. So they were looking to unlock investment by proving that they had some traction in the product. So the main aim, it was very clear, the main aim was they needed to show that people wanted their product and were signing up to it and were booking the demos, and that they were then clicking through, and the click-through rates were going through to them, then using that product, and then really importantly that they could retain them, because otherwise it's just never ending bucket. So that was one thing we did. And then what we could do is we already knew what the investor story was at the end of that. So we were already sort of documenting that alongside. Another one might be where you've had the investment, but now what you want to be able to show is you need to be able to obviously show that you're growing as you said you were going to. And if you're not, and this is actually equally as important, because there's no investor is looking for you to just gloss over and PR how everything's going, because that's a waste of your time, their time. It's like, doesn't make any sense. So let's say you're looking to acquire new customers. They've given you how much you're spending on the media and how much you're spending on doing that. You're tracking it all, and let's say it's not working. So you want to make sure you've given it enough time to then understand what isn't working, where's the problem, and then you can report back that you've done this exercise, found the problem, and then this is what you're now putting in to be able to try and get over that problem and get to the next stage. And so that's another kind of part of your updates for investors and reporting on what you're doing. So yeah, they absolutely run parallel, and you want to be thinking 5 steps ahead, because ideally from the investment side, you've always got that going on in the background, and that's part of your story as to what you're doing.
Yeah, especially in the early stages. Even later on, but the early stages is especially crucial, because it can mean life or death of a startup, right? So
yeah.
And just to have a question for you in regards to repositioning or changing the branding past a certain point. In your experience, how feasible is that? So for example, let's just say AI company X, until Series A has a certain branding, and then all of a sudden they want to change. What are the main challenges of that? And in your opinion, how long does it take to change maybe consumer behavior towards a brand and a company?
Yeah, so it depends what it is, and it depends, I guess, number one is like, why are you doing it? So on that, there's that whole positioning. So let's say you're trying to move through to a different positioning. So your logo may be your constant. So your logo may be exactly the same, and then you're looking to change positioning through a change of messaging step by step. And perhaps, and the great thing about, and this is the difference between having brand and then campaigns, they're brand campaigns or advertising campaigns. So you can navigate and you can use these different levers depending on what you're trying to do, but you just got to be clear on what you're trying to do. So if you were looking to change let's say the brand, for some reason the brand identity just didn't look right, and there was a certain thing you needed to do to change it, you can also do that in steps. So actually one of the biggest companies I've worked for and was on the board for a while, Citywire, I came in, they've been going for 20 years, and they're all like opening across in all over the world. But the brand was different in every country almost, in terms of just the slight nuances of the colors and the way that it was the the comms worked. And so what I did with them was I looked and I worked with their design team internally and looked to, over time, align it all so it all was all looking like one global consistent brand. And this wasn't like you know, day one, we suddenly just switched over and here's the new logo. The strapline, the logo, the look of it, there was a few anomalies here and there. And so we sort of created like a little transition so that people wouldn't notice as much, but we'd end up in the place where we wanted to end up. So you can gradually bring it in if it's the look and feel, or if you need, it really depends on what you need. And in terms of time, I guess it depends on what you're, again, sorry, all my answers are like, what are you looking to do?
Yeah, I mean, fair enough.
But it does, it's like it's just question, and then
it shows the bespoke.
Sorry.
Yeah, it shows the bespoke and tailored solutions that you guys offer as well, right? So it's not one size fits all model, which is very important when looking at especially because you guys work across seed, Series A, sector agnostic. So that makes sense. Look, let's wrap up. We have two more questions. What, in your opinion, sets Ozer apart for startups, aiming for rapid scaling and market impact?
Another good question. I think I would say clarity of thought and creative thinking, and those two things working together, because I think that's what sets us apart. It's consultancy, but it's got creative thinking weaved in, and I like I mentioned quite a few times, like the power of creativity for me is massive.
Yeah. Okay, great. And for startups interested in your Ozer services, what are the initial steps or processes involved in beginning a partnership with your team?
Yeah, really simple. And one of the reasons, one of the things I wanted to do, having worked in these big agencies, which obviously cost a lot of money for good reason, I wanted to offer startups that kind of big agency thinking. Some of the consultants that we work with have spent, way better than me, have spent longer than I have in the agencies they've been in. And I wanted to offer just a very, like, you can literally have a couple of hours, or you could have a half-day workshop, or you could have just a piece of a piece of strategy to sort of drive your business forward. So it starts with an intro call, and then depending on what you need, we usually start small. So we'll start with a particular brief and then go from there. And it's like anything, like once people get a feel for how you work, then they're like, oh, actually, could you have a look at this, and could you have a look at that? But yeah, it's for me, it's just about ascertaining what you're looking to do, which is usually, this is the challenge, or this is an area, or even if they're not sure of what that is, they might just want a bit of a strategic call to just sort of peel that out. So it's almost like we can tell them what we think they need to be doing next.
So you start small, and then all of a sudden you're running out of inventory, so you have to stop it. Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, Citywire started with one initial, helping them with what was their sort of startup in New York, and it ended up with me sat on a board. So yeah.
There we go. And then last one, which I ask everyone in a slightly different context. What advice would you give startup founders who might be hesitant about investing in professional branding and marketing services?
I would say the advice I would give is you might think it costs, like someone's cost is expensive, but what you'll get with someone who's been doing something for a long time and knows what they're doing is going to save you so much time in the future. And it's about being really clear on what you need, because if you're just starting out, you don't need to be spending crazy amounts of money on your brand or your marketing or whatever, but it's just giving an experienced person. It's actually cheaper in the long run if you work it out. We have this service which is like a CMO on the go. So if you were going to bring in a marketing strategist into your business, it's a CMO, for example, it's going to cost you a lot of money as a salary. Whereas if you can just access that thinking, that higher sort of more experienced thinking as and when you need it. You don't need it a lot of times in your business, but if you can access it at the right time, you can just make sure that the thing you're doing is going to be right first time, and you're not going backwards and forwards trying to figure it out. And it also sets the path for what everybody else needs to be doing, who would sit underneath that person normally in kind of day to day.
Fantastic. Well, look, Laura, I want to say a massive thank you. I think your insights have been wonderful. And for anyone who wants to get in touch with Laura or with Ozer, there's going to be the link below, and Laura's details as well. So yeah, please make sure to connect with Laura. And yeah, thank you very much, Laura.
Thank you so much.